She stole her sister's husband and said someone had to take care of him, but karma came with two babies. At 48 years old, I never imagined I'd be the mother who had to choose between her daughters. But when my youngest daughter, Rebecca, destroyed her sister's marriage and showed nothing but cold arrogance when confronted, I knew I had to teach her a lesson about consequences that would echo through the rest of her life. What happened next would either shatter our family completely or forge something new from the broken pieces. I'm Margaret, mother of three. Catherine is 30, Rebecca is 27, and my son Daniel just turned 23. My husband Thomas and I celebrated our 29th anniversary last spring, and until 4 years ago, I genuinely believed we'd built something unbreakable. We had our rough patches, sure, but doesn't every family? Looking back now, I realize how dangerously naive that optimism was. The unraveling started 4 years ago. Catherine was married to Vincent, and they seemed to have that rare thing, the kind of partnership that makes other couples quietly envious. Vincent had become like a son to me over their 6 years together. I watched him surprise Catherine with her favorite flowers every Friday, watched him hold her hand during family dinners, watched him look at her like she was the only person in the room. Catherine glowed around him. She was genuinely, deeply happy. Then something devastating happened to Catherine. I won't share the details because that's her story to tell, not mine, but it was the kind of trauma that fundamentally changes who you are. I watched my daughter, this bright, confident woman, become a shadow of herself. Her eyes were perpetually red and swollen. She flinched at sudden movements. She stopped returning calls from friends. The worst part was watching her retreat into herself, pushing away everyone who tried to help, even us. As a mother, that helplessness is a special kind of torture. You do anything, give anything to take away your child's pain, but some wounds you can't heal for them. All I could do was be there, keep showing up, keep telling her we loved her. It never felt like enough. And then, just when I thought things couldn't possibly get worse, I discovered that Vincent had been having an affair with Rebecca, my own daughter, Catherine's sister. The moment I found out, it felt like someone had reached into my chest and crushed my heart with their bare hands. The betrayal was so staggering, so incomprehensible, that for a full minute I couldn't breathe. I didn't hear it from Rebecca or Vincent. I found out from Catherine after she caught them together. The image of my eldest daughter's face when she told me will haunt me until the day I die. Catherine was utterly demolished. I'd never seen another human being look so completely shattered, and I pray to God I never do again. When I confronted Rebecca about what she'd done, I expected tears, desperate apologies, maybe some pathetic attempt to explain the inexplicable. But instead, she just shrugged with this casual indifference that made my blood run cold and said, "Well, someone had to take care of Vincent since Catherine wasn't available." I stood there, stunned into complete silence. She said it so matter-of-factly, like she was discussing the weather, like she hadn't just detonated a bomb in the center of our family. This was my daughter, a child I'd raised, and I couldn't recognize the person standing in front of me. The cruelty of it, the complete absence of remorse, it was beyond anything I could have imagined. I had to physically leave the room before I did something I'd regret, before I said things that could never be unsaid. That was the moment everything crystallized for me. I couldn't have Rebecca in my life, not until she truly understood the magnitude of what she'd done. I told her in the clearest possible terms that she needed to stay away from me, from Thomas, and especially from Catherine. At first she tried to argue, but when she realized I was absolutely serious, she started screaming. She said things like, "You're choosing Catherine over me, and you're such a hypocrite, and I knew you always loved her more." But honestly, her words just bounced off me. I was done. Meanwhile, Catherine was barely surviving. She blamed herself for everything. Vincent's infidelity, the destruction of her relationship with her sister, even the traumatic event that had happened to her. No matter how many times I told her none of this was her fault, she couldn't believe it. She kept saying maybe if I had been a better wife, this wouldn't have happened, and maybe if I hadn't been so broken, he wouldn't have needed someone else. It broke my heart into smaller and smaller pieces every time I heard her say those things. We got Catherine into therapy, which turned out to be one of the few right decisions I made during that nightmare period. She was resistant at first, didn't want to talk to a stranger about her pain, but slowly, gradually, therapy gave her tools to start rebuilding herself. It wasn't some miraculous overnight transformation. Healing never is. But bit by bit, session by session, I started to see glimpses of my daughter again. She started accepting invitations from friends. She picked up a photography hobby she'd abandoned. And one day, I heard her laugh, really laugh, for the first time in months. That sound was like oxygen after drowning. Rebecca, on the other hand, showed absolutely zero remorse. After Catherine and Vincent's divorce was finalized, Rebecca and Vincent went aggressively public with their relationship. They didn't even pretend to be discreet about it. They plastered social media with couple photos, posted about romantic getaways, acted like they were some kind of fairy tale love story instead of a relationship built on betrayal and another woman's devastation. It was infuriating and nauseating in equal measure. Then came the ultimate slap in the face. Rebecca and Vincent announced their engagement. I found out through Daniel, who called me in complete disbelief after seeing their engagement party photos online. The photos showed Rebecca with this massive diamond ring, both of them grinning like they'd won some kind of prize. Then Rebecca had the absolute audacity to call and ask if Thomas and I would come to the wedding. I was so appalled I could barely form words. When I finally could speak, I told her in no uncertain terms that I could not and would not support their relationship, and that we would not be attending any wedding. Thomas felt exactly the same way. Rebecca tried to argue, saying things like, "You're being so unfair, and Vincent really loves me, Mom, and why can't you just be happy for me?" She actually asked me that. Why couldn't I be happy that she destroyed her sister's life and marriage? I also gave her a warning, and I meant every word of it. If Vincent cheated with you, he will absolutely cheat on you. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. A man who will betray his wife with her own sister has no moral boundaries. She didn't take that well, got angry and defensive, but I didn't care. My priority was and always would be protecting Catherine. Rebecca had made her choices. Now she could live with the consequences. Looking back on that period, I still can't fully comprehend how much changed in such a short time. What had felt like a strong, unbreakable family bond was completely obliterated. I barely recognized Rebecca anymore. The girl I'd raised, who used to be kind and thoughtful, had become someone capable of calculated cruelty. My relationship with her was fundamentally altered, maybe permanently. As much as it hurt to admit, I didn't know if I'd ever be able to forgive her for what she'd done to Catherine. She's still my daughter, and some small part of me wants to believe people can change, but I wasn't holding my breath. After cutting contact with Rebecca, I honestly thought we'd hit rock bottom. I mean, how much worse could things possibly get, right? I severely underestimated just how deep Rebecca's selfishness ran. For several months, she stayed quiet. She didn't reach out to me or Thomas, which was honestly a relief. But that peace was temporary. One afternoon, Daniel came storming into the house with his phone clutched in his hand. I'll never forget the expression on his face, this mixture of rage and disbelief that made him look older than his years. He shoved his phone toward me and said, "Have you seen this?" I looked down at the screen and saw a photo of Rebecca and Vincent, arms wrapped around each other, both beaming at the camera. In the caption, Rebecca had written, "He put a ring on it. Forever love," with about 15 heart emojis. They were engaged. My daughter was engaged to the man who had betrayed her sister during the worst period of her life. It felt like another punch to the gut, like I couldn't catch my breath. But it wasn't just the engagement itself. It was the way they flaunted it, showing zero consideration for how it would affect anyone else, especially Catherine. It was the arrogance of it, the complete absence of shame or self-awareness. I wasn't sure how to tell Catherine. She was finally making real progress in therapy, finally starting to sleep through the night again, finally starting to believe that maybe she could have a future that wasn't defined by this pain. I didn't want to undo all that hard-won progress. But I knew she'd find out eventually, and I didn't want her to be blindsided. So I sat her down and told her as gently as I possibly could. Her face fell immediately. She just sat there in complete silence for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a minute or two. Then she said very quietly, "I knew they were together, but I didn't think they'd actually take it this far." She didn't cry, but I could see the hurt in her eyes. It was like watching someone get stabbed all over again. The wound reopened just when it was starting to heal. After that, I decided I needed to reach out to Rebecca. I hadn't spoken to her in months, but I felt like I had to say something, if not for my sake then for Catherine's. I called her and surprisingly, she picked up. I told her how deeply hurtful her actions were, that getting engaged to Vincent was pouring salt into a wound that was still raw. Her response made me want to scream. Mom, you just don't understand. Vincent and I are in love. What Catherine and Vincent had is over. It's been over for years. Why can't you just let go and be happy for me? She said it with this entitled tone, like I was the one being unreasonable. Like Catherine's pain was just an inconvenient obstacle to Rebecca's happiness. I couldn't believe she had the nerve to say that. I told her, slowly and clearly so there would be no misunderstanding, that I would never support her relationship with Vincent. I also warned her again that if Vincent could cheat on Catherine, a woman he'd vowed to love and cherish, he could just as easily cheat on her. Cheaters don't change. They just find new victims. She actually laughed it off, saying Vincent's a different person with me. You'll see, we have something special. That was the last time we spoke for quite a while. Then came their engagement party. No, I absolutely did not go. Let's be crystal clear about that. But Daniel did. He said he didn't want to support them, but he was curious to see how it would all play out. According to him, the party was everything you'd expect from Rebecca and Vincent. Flashy, over the top, completely devoid of self-awareness or taste. They even had the audacity to post dozens of photos on social media with captions like "True love wins" and "Can't wait to spend forever with my soulmate." The comment section was absolutely chaotic. Some people congratulated them, but plenty of others called them out for their disgusting behavior. It was a circus. Daniel also told me that some extended family members showed up, which shocked me. I later found out that most of them didn't know the full story. They thought Rebecca and Vincent had gotten together after the divorce, not during Catherine and Vincent's marriage. When the truth came out, a lot of them were furious and felt manipulated. One of my sisters even called to apologize profusely for attending, saying she had absolutely no idea what Rebecca had actually done. Meanwhile, Catherine was doing her best to move forward. She stopped following Rebecca and Vincent on all social media and asked us not to mention them around her. I respected her wishes completely, but it was hard to avoid the topic entirely, especially with Daniel constantly updating me on their antics. He was just as angry as I was, maybe even more so. He kept saying things like, "How can she not see how wrong this is?" And "Vincent's such a scumbag. I don't know how she can stand him." Thomas stayed quiet for the most part. He's always been the calm, steady one in our relationship, the rock when everything else is chaos. But I could tell he was just as upset as I was. One night, after a particularly rough day, he sat down next to me and said, "I don't know where we went wrong with Rebecca. I thought we raised her better than this." That hit me harder than almost anything else. I've been asking myself that same question over and over, but hearing him say it out loud made it feel so much more real, so much more final. The engagement eventually turned into wedding planning, and I tried to tune it out as much as possible. But Rebecca kept finding ways to involve me, even though I'd made my position abundantly clear. She'd send text messages like, "Mom, do you want to help me pick out a dress?" Or, "We're looking at venues next weekend. Want to come?" Each time, I replied with a polite but firm no. I thought eventually she'd get the hint, but she didn't. Then one evening, out of nowhere, she called me. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. She sounded so excited, almost manic, and said, "Mom, I really want you and Dad to walk me down the aisle together. It would mean so much to me. Please say yes." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything, she still thought we'd participate in celebrating this relationship. I told her, as gently as I could manage, that we couldn't support her wedding. Not because we didn't love her, but because of everything that had happened, everything she'd done. She started crying and said, "You're choosing Catherine over me again. You always choose her. Why can't you just let this go?" That broke my heart, but I stood my ground. I told her this wasn't about choosing one daughter over another. It was about doing what was right. That conversation ended with her hanging up on me, and I didn't hear from her for months after that. Honestly, I was okay with that silence. As much as I missed the Rebecca I used to know, the girl she'd been before all this, I couldn't let her actions go unchecked. She needed to understand that choices have consequences, that you can't destroy people and expect everyone to smile and celebrate your happiness. After the engagement party disaster and Rebecca's increasingly tone-deaf attempts to involve us in the wedding, things went eerily quiet. I didn't hear from Rebecca, Vincent, or even much from extended family. To be honest, I thought maybe they'd finally accepted our position and decided to move on without us. It was bittersweet. On one hand, it felt like a relief not to deal with constant drama. On the other, I couldn't shake the profound sadness of knowing how fractured our family had become. Catherine was doing her best to heal, but I could see how much the situation still weighed on her. She'd started setting firm boundaries with family, avoiding any gatherings where she thought Rebecca or Vincent might show up. One time we planned a small family barbecue, and she specifically asked, "Are they going to be there?" I assured her they weren't invited, but the fact that she even had to ask broke my heart all over again. She should have been able to feel safe with her own family, but instead she was constantly on edge, constantly looking over her shoulder. One night, Catherine and I were sitting in the living room, just the two of us, and she opened up in a way she hadn't before. "Mom," she said, staring at the floor, "I don't think I'll ever forgive her. Not just for Vincent, but for the way she treated me when I was at my absolute lowest. She didn't just betray me, she enjoyed it. She looked at my pain and felt nothing." Hearing her say that was like a knife twisting in my heart. I didn't know how to respond because honestly, I couldn't blame her. Rebecca's actions had been so calculated, so deliberately cruel, and she'd shown absolutely no remorse. Around this time, Daniel started pulling away from Rebecca too. He'd been furious about her actions from the very beginning, but he'd maintained some contact, mostly out of a sense of family obligation. But one day he came to me and said, "Mom, I can't do it anymore. Every time I talk to her, she acts like she's the victim in all this. I'm sick of it. I'm done." He stopped answering her calls and unfollowed her on social media. I think losing Daniel's support was a wake-up call for Rebecca because not long after, she started reaching out to me again. At first it was just small things. Texts asking how we were doing, little updates about wedding planning that I never asked for. I kept my responses short and polite, but didn't engage much. Then out of nowhere, she sent me this long message about how much she missed our family and how hard it was to plan a wedding without her parents' support. She even said something like, "I know I've made mistakes, but can't we just move forward? Can't we put this behind us?" I stared at that message for a long time before responding. Finally, I wrote back, "Rebecca, I love you. You're my daughter and I always will love you. But you need to take real responsibility for the pain you've caused before we can even think about moving forward." Her reply was immediate and defensive. She said she had nothing to apologize for because she and Vincent were meant to be together, and if Catherine couldn't handle that, it wasn't her fault. After reading that, I didn't respond. I didn't see the point. Several months passed. Rebecca and Vincent got married in what I assume was a beautiful ceremony, though I wouldn't know because obviously we didn't attend. I heard through the grapevine that some family members who did go felt awkward the entire time. One of my cousins even texted me afterward to say it felt like everyone was pretending not to notice the elephant in the room. The whole thing was uncomfortable. I wish I'd stayed home. After the wedding, things went quiet again. Rebecca didn't contact us, and honestly, I thought maybe she'd finally moved on with her life. Catherine started to seem a little lighter too. She was going out more, laughing more, even started dating someone new. It was like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. I started to feel hopeful that maybe, just maybe, we could put this entire nightmare behind us and find some kind of peace. But then, about 8 months after the wedding, on a cold, rainy evening, everything exploded again. I was in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner when I heard frantic, desperate knocking at the door. At first I thought it might be a neighbor needing help with something, but when I opened the door, there stood Rebecca. She was soaking wet from the rain, mascara running down her face, crying hysterically, and holding a baby in one arm while a toddler clung to her leg. I was so shocked I couldn't form words. She just stood there, looking completely defeated, utterly broken, and finally said through her sobs, "Mom, I need your help. Please, I have nowhere else to go." I let her in, of course. As angry as I was, as much as I wanted to say, "I told you so," I couldn't turn her away, not with two small children there. She sat on the couch, still sobbing, while I got her a towel and tried to calm her down enough to talk. Once she finally caught her breath and the crying subsided to quiet tears, she started telling me what had happened. Apparently, Vincent had been emotionally and verbally abusive for months. He'd been controlling, constantly putting her down, monitoring her phone, criticizing everything she did. She tried to brush it off at first, thinking it was just stress or adjustment to married life. But then he started disappearing for long stretches, coming home at odd hours, being secretive about his phone. And then she found out the truth. Vincent had been cheating on her. Extensively. He had another woman on the side. Actually, he had a whole other family that he'd been hiding. "Mom," she said through fresh tears, "I can't go back there. I just can't. He's not the person I thought he was. I was so wrong about everything." Hearing her say that stirred up so many complicated emotions. On one hand, I felt for her. I'm not a monster. No one deserves to be abused or cheated on. But on the other hand, I couldn't help thinking you chose this. You knew exactly who he was, and you still chose him. You chose him over your sister, over your family. It was a hard thing to reconcile, that simultaneous sympathy and frustration. Rebecca begged me to let her and the kids stay with us. She said she had nowhere else to go, no money of her own, no job, nothing. I told her I needed time to think about it. I couldn't make any rash decisions, especially knowing how this might affect Catherine. After everything Catherine had been through, after all her hard work in therapy, I couldn't risk doing anything that might set her back or reopen those barely healed wounds. That night, I told Thomas what had happened. He was just as conflicted as I was. "We can't just turn her away," he said, running his hands through his hair in that way he does when he's stressed. "But we also can't ignore how much she's hurt Catherine. We can't sacrifice one daughter for the other." It felt like we were stuck between a rock and a hard place. No matter what we decided, someone was going to get hurt. I didn't sleep at all that night. I kept replaying everything in my head. Rebecca's betrayal of Catherine. Catherine's years of pain and slow healing. Vincent's predictable, almost inevitable betrayal of Rebecca. The two innocent children sleeping downstairs who had no say in any of this. I didn't know what the right answer was, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever decision I made, it had to be for the good of the family as a whole. Not just for Rebecca, not just for Catherine, but for everyone. The next morning, I made some calls. I found a small one-bedroom apartment across town that was available immediately. Thomas and I agreed we'd cover the first 2 months of rent and help Rebecca get in touch with a lawyer to start divorce proceedings. We'd also help with temporary daycare costs so she could look for a job. But she couldn't stay in our house. That boundary had to be maintained for Catherine's sake. When I told Rebecca about our decision, I expected gratitude, or at least understanding. Instead, she got angry. "This is my family," she yelled, her voice shaking with rage. "How can you just turn me away like this, after everything I've been through?" I tried to stay calm and explain that it wasn't about turning her away. It was about protecting Catherine's mental health and respecting the boundaries she needed. But Rebecca wasn't having it. "Catherine needs to get over it," she snapped. "It's been years. How much longer are you going to coddle her? When do I get to matter?" That was the moment Thomas, who had been silent until then, completely lost his temper. He stood up, his face flushed, and said, "Don't you dare talk about your sister like that. Do you even realize, do you have any comprehension of how much pain you caused her? You destroyed her when she was at her most vulnerable. You're lucky we're even willing to help you at all." Rebecca burst into tears and ran out of the room, leaving Thomas and me sitting there in heavy silence. Over the next few days, I helped her get settled in the apartment. I went with her to meet with a lawyer. I helped her apply for some jobs and set up childcare. But she remained distant and cold, barely speaking to me unless it was absolutely necessary. It was clear she felt betrayed by us, which was almost darkly funny given everything she'd done. As for Catherine, I made sure to check in with her regularly and reassure her that Rebecca wouldn't be staying with us, that her boundaries would be respected. She seemed relieved, but I could tell the whole situation was still weighing on her. "I just want things to go back to how they used to be," she said one day, her voice small and sad. "But I know they never will." She was right. No matter what I did, no matter how hard I tried, our family would never be the same. But I had to believe we could find a way to move forward. Maybe not as the happy, united family we once were, but as something new. Something that worked for everyone, even if it looked nothing like what we'd had before. Once Rebecca moved into the apartment Thomas and I secured for her, I genuinely thought things might finally stabilize. It wasn't ideal, far from it, but it seemed like a step in the right direction. She had a roof over her head, a place to regroup and rebuild. We paid for daycare for the first month so she could focus on job hunting. It was the best we could do given the circumstances, especially with tensions still running high. But things didn't go smoothly at all. Rebecca wasn't grateful for the help. Instead, she seemed to resent it. She kept complaining about the apartment being too small, the neighborhood not being nice enough, the lack of amenities. I tried to remind her gently that this was temporary, that she needed to focus on getting back on her feet. But she wasn't receptive. "I can't live like this, Mom," she said during one phone call, her voice dripping with entitlement. "I have 2 kids. They deserve better than this." I bit my tongue so hard I almost drew blood. I wanted to say, "They deserved better than Vincent too, but you didn't think about that, did you?" Instead, I calmly reminded her that this was a starting point, not a permanent situation. "You're going to have to put in the work, Rebecca. This isn't going to fix itself overnight." The job hunt was a disaster. Rebecca hadn't worked in years, and her resume was basically empty. She applied to a handful of retail and customer service positions, but showed almost no motivation to follow up. "They're not going to hire me anyway," she said one day, already defeated before she'd even tried. It was frustrating to watch her give up so easily, especially knowing she had no other options. Meanwhile, word had spread through the family that Rebecca was back in town and that we'd helped her find a place. Some of my siblings called to voice their strong opinions, most of them negative. "After what she did to Catherine, you're still helping her?" One of them said. "You're enabling her bad behavior. You know that, right?" I hated hearing it, but I understood where they were coming from. From the outside, it probably did look like I was rewarding Rebecca's terrible choices. I couldn't bring myself to turn my back on her completely, especially with 2 innocent kids involved. Catherine was keeping her distance. We hadn't told her all the details about how we were helping Rebecca, only that Rebecca wasn't staying with us. I didn't want to burden her with more information than necessary, but I also didn't want her to feel blindsided if she happened to run into Rebecca somewhere. So one afternoon, I brought it up gently. "Rebecca is staying in an apartment across town," I said carefully. "We helped her with the first couple months of rent, but after that she's on her own." Catherine nodded, her expression unreadable. "I figured you'd do something like that," she said quietly. "It's fine. I just don't want to be involved." Her response was calm, measured, but I could sense an undercurrent of hurt beneath it. I knew this was putting strain on our relationship, creating distance between us even as I tried to do the right thing. Daniel was furious when he found out we were helping Rebecca at all. "Why are you bending over backward for her after everything she's done?" he asked one night, his voice tight with anger. "She doesn't deserve it. She doesn't deserve anything from this family." I tried to explain that it wasn't about what Rebecca deserved. "Her kids are innocent in all of this," I said. "They need stability, and if we can help provide that, then I think we should." But Daniel wasn't convinced. "You're just letting her manipulate you," he said flatly. "She's never going to change if you keep bailing her out." His words stung because deep down, I knew there was truth to them. But what was the alternative? Letting Rebecca and those children sink completely? I wasn't sure I could live with that. Rebecca's struggles took a serious toll on her emotionally. She called me late one night, crying so hard she could barely speak. "I ruined everything," she sobbed. "My marriage, my relationship with Catherine, my whole life. I don't even know who I am anymore." It was the first time she'd shown any real self-awareness, and for a moment, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe this was her turning point. Maybe she was finally understanding the gravity of her choices. But that hope was devastatingly short-lived. The next time I spoke to her, she was back to blaming everyone but herself. "If Vincent hadn't turned out to be garbage, I wouldn't be in this mess," she said bitterly. "And if Catherine had just forgiven me years ago, maybe things wouldn't be so bad now. Why does everyone act like I am the only one at fault?" It was like she couldn't decide whether to take responsibility or play the victim. The constant back and forth was absolutely exhausting. The breaking point came about 6 weeks after she'd moved into the apartment. Rebecca showed up at our house unexpectedly one evening. She looked exhausted, frazzled, desperate. The kids were clinging to her legs, both of them crying. I need to stay here, she said without preamble. Just for a few nights. Please, Mom. I can't do this anymore. My heart sank. Rebecca, we've been over this, I said firmly. You can't stay here. It's not fair to Catherine. We agreed on boundaries. Her face crumpled and she started crying again. I don't know what else to do, she said, her voice breaking. I'm trying, Mom. I really am. But nothing's working. I feel like I'm drowning and no one cares. I felt an overwhelming wave of guilt crash over me, but I held firm. We'll help you find more resources, I said, keeping my voice steady even though my hands were shaking. We'll help you figure this out. But you can't stay here. That boundary exists for a reason, and we're not going to cross it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake replaying the conversation, wondering if I'd made the right call. Part of me wanted to believe that tough love was the answer, that sometimes people need to hit bottom before they can change. But another part worried I was just pushing Rebecca further away, that I was failing her when she needed help most. At the same time, I couldn't ignore the damage it would do to Catherine if I let Rebecca move back in. It felt like no matter what I did, I was failing one of my daughters. This went on for months. Rebecca would have moments of seeming progress, then she'd backslide into blame and self-pity. The job search continued to go nowhere. She burned through the rent money we'd given her faster than expected. She called asking for more help, and each time, Thomas and I had to make difficult decisions about where the line was. But slowly, painfully slowly, something started to shift. Rebecca finally got a part-time job at a grocery store. It wasn't much, but it was something. She started going to a support group for single mothers, which seemed to help her mentally. She stopped calling me every day demanding help and started trying to solve problems on her own first. It wasn't a dramatic transformation, and there were still plenty of setbacks, but it was progress. Meanwhile, Catherine was genuinely thriving. She got a promotion at work, something she'd been working toward for years. She joined a photography club and started displaying her work at local galleries. And she started seriously dating someone new, a kind, patient man named Richard who treated her with the respect and love she deserved. When she brought him to meet us for the first time, I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen in years. Hope, joy, a belief that good things were still possible for her. Watching Catherine heal and grow was like watching a flower bloom after a brutal winter. It reminded me that healing is possible even after the deepest wounds. Even after the worst betrayals. It just takes time and work and the right support. As for my relationship with Rebecca, it remained strained and complicated. We talked occasionally, mostly about the kids or practical matters. She never truly apologized for what she'd done to Catherine. She never took full responsibility, but she did start to show signs of understanding that actions have consequences, that you can't hurt people and expect everything to be fine. One afternoon, about a year after she'd left Vincent, Rebecca called me. Her voice was different, quieter, less entitled. Mom, she said, I know I can't undo what I did. I know I hurt Catherine in ways I can't fix. I just want you to know that I think about it. I think about it every day. I don't know if that matters to you, but I wanted you to know. It wasn't the apology I'd wanted. It wasn't enough to heal everything, but it was something. It was a crack in the wall she'd built around herself, a tiny acknowledgement of the pain she'd caused. I didn't tell Catherine about that conversation. It wasn't my place to decide what, if anything, it meant for their relationship. That was between them, if and when Catherine ever felt ready to engage with Rebecca again. My job was to support both of them in whatever way I could while maintaining boundaries and protecting everyone's well-being. Daniel eventually softened toward Rebecca a little, though he still kept his distance. He started occasionally answering her texts and even visited her apartment once to see his niece and nephew. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was a thaw in the ice that had frozen their relationship. Thomas and I learned to navigate this new reality. Our family dinners were smaller now, carefully planned to avoid putting anyone in an uncomfortable position. Holidays required complex coordination. We couldn't have the big gatherings we used to have because Catherine and Rebecca still couldn't be in the same room. I learned to accept that some things can't be fixed. Some betrayals are too deep, some wounds too severe. Our family would never be what it once was. That happy, unified image I'd carried in my head for so many years was gone, shattered beyond repair. But that didn't mean we couldn't build something new from the pieces. Catherine eventually told me something that stayed with me. We were having coffee one afternoon, and she said, "Mom, you taught me something important through all of this. You taught me that love doesn't mean accepting everything. Sometimes love means holding boundaries. Sometimes it means letting people face consequences. That's actually harder than just forgiving everything and pretending nothing happened." Those words meant more to me than she probably realized, because that's exactly what I'd been struggling with for years. The guilt of not being able to fix everything, of not being able to wave a magic wand and make our family whole again. But she was right. Real love, mature love, sometimes means standing firm even when it breaks your heart. I still see Rebecca occasionally, mostly for the sake of my grandchildren. Those kids are beautiful, bright little souls who remind me that even in the midst of terrible choices and painful consequences, there's still innocence and joy to be found. They don't deserve to be punished for their parents' mistakes. So I show up for them, take them to the park, read them stories, give them the stability they need. Rebecca has grown in some ways, though she still has a long way to go. She eventually got a second job and moved into a slightly bigger apartment. The divorce from Vincent was finalized, and he moved to another state. Good riddance, honestly. She doesn't talk about him much anymore except to say he still barely pays child support and rarely sees the kids. I don't say, "I told you so," though God knows I'm tempted sometimes. Sarah hasn't spoken to Rebecca since the initial fallout, and I don't push her to. I've learned that healing looks different for everyone, and it's not my place to dictate what that should look like. Sarah has built a beautiful life for herself, one that doesn't include her sister, and she has every right to that peace. If she ever decides to reach out to Rebecca, it will be on her terms, in her time, if ever. The extended family has slowly started to understand the full picture of what happened. Some have maintained relationships with both sisters, carefully navigating the divide. Others have chosen sides, and I can't blame them. It's messy and complicated, and there are no easy answers. I think about that night Rebecca showed up on my doorstep, soaking wet and desperate, more than I'd like to admit. Part of me still wonders if I made the right choices. Should I have let her stay? Should I have been harder on her? More lenient? The truth is, I'll never know if I handled everything perfectly. I'm sure there are things I could have done better, things I should have said differently. But here's what I do know. I did the best I could with an impossible situation. I tried to balance compassion with accountability. I tried to help Rebecca without sacrificing Catherine's well-being. I tried to teach Rebecca that actions have consequences while still showing her that she's loved. Whether I succeeded at all of that, I honestly can't say. What I can say is this. That lesson I set out to teach Rebecca about consequences and accountability and how you can't destroy people without losing something yourself, I think it's finally starting to sink in. Not because of anything I said, but because she's lived through the natural results of her choices. She lost her family. She lost her marriage. She lost years of her life to someone who was exactly the person I warned her he was. Sometimes the most powerful lessons aren't the ones we're taught with words. They're the ones we learn by living through the consequences of our own decisions. Rebecca destroyed Catherine's marriage and showed arrogant contempt when confronted. So I taught her a lesson by refusing to shield her from the consequences, by maintaining boundaries, by prioritizing the daughter who'd been wronged over the daughter who'd done the wronging. Was it the right thing to do? I believe it was. Would I do it again? Yes, without hesitation. Because at the end of the day, real love sometimes means letting people fall so they can learn to pick themselves up. To anyone out there struggling with family issues, especially those involving betrayal and broken trust, I want you to know something. It's okay to set boundaries, even with people you love. It's okay to prioritize your mental health and the well-being of those who've been hurt. It's okay to let go of the idea that things will ever go back to how they were before. Sometimes moving forward doesn't mean reconciliation. Sometimes it means accepting that the family you have now looks nothing like the family you had before, and that's okay. Sometimes it means loving someone from a distance while they learn lessons you can't teach them yourself. My family is fractured. There's no denying that. But within those fractures, there's also growth. Catherine has built a life that brings her joy. Rebecca is learning to stand on her own 2 feet. Daniel has learned to set his own boundaries and honor them. And Thomas and I have learned that sometimes the best thing you can do as parents is refuse to fix everything. We're not the happy, unified family we once were, but we are real, we're honest, and we are all doing the work of healing in our own ways, at our own pace. If I could go back and prevent any of this from happening, would I? Of course. The pain of watching your children hurt each other is something no parent should have to endure, but I can't change the past. None of us can. All we can do is move forward, set healthy boundaries, and hope that someday, maybe not today or tomorrow or even next year, but someday, there might be a path towards some form of reconciliation. Until then, I'll keep showing up for my grandchildren. I'll keep supporting Catherine as she builds her beautiful life. I'll keep maintaining boundaries with Rebecca while still offering help when it's appropriate. And I'll keep believing that teaching someone about consequences, even when it's painful, even when it fractures your family, is sometimes the most loving thing you can do. Because at the end of the day, real love isn't about keeping everyone comfortable. It's about helping people grow into better versions of themselves, even when that growth is painful, even when it costs you something, even when it means your family will never look the same again. That's the lesson I taught Rebecca. And truthfully, it's the lesson she taught me too.